There's a human trafficking epidemic that very few people are talking about, and that is the commercial surrogacy industry and associated fertility technologies that are being developed that will create a wider black market organ trade in years to come. So I thought we need to look at some of the recent stories about the international sales of mothers and children because this obviously needs to end, but I don't see how it will anytime soon without relentless pressure. If you want to learn more about this sort of stuff, you can go over to our website and pay us as little as £5 a month to get all the premium content. Where Carl and I, in this video about the evil origins of feminism, this is a sequel to the original discussion on Beauvoir, talked about the concept of cyborg theocracy invented by the lady in the thumbnail with the glowing red eyes. And that's the idea that
Is that Mecca Harrington?
Yes, that's sure like that one. That's the idea that reproductive technologies have become the prerequisite for operating in the world, as Abigail Favale says. Given the pill is the first transhumanist technology, it's the first time that a woman's biological system can be set to off as a default setting rather than on. So that means that it becomes the new requirement to participate in the workforce and in culture. And eventually, we're going to be seeing further transhumanist gender-based technologies to augment your authentic self. And we're going to be seeing that, as I mentioned later on, with womb transplants. Yeah, it's going to be a dark one, I'm afraid. So let's go to Greece first. This is a recent bust of a human trafficking ring on the island of Crete. This was 8 people arrested as part of a surrogacy trafficking gang. This is since December 2022, a total of 182 incidents involving the exploitation of women within the domains of egg retrieval and surrogacy have been documented in Greece. The fertility clinic situated in Crete brought to light an alarming account of over 400 cases involving deceptive practices related to sham in vitro fertilization, that's IVF. The group was allegedly engaged in human trafficking through the practice of industrial births, illicitly orchestrating baby adoptions, and perpetuating fraudulent schemes by offering counterfeit IVF treatments to unsuspecting parents. Patients, sorry, or parents and patients, I suppose.
Yeah.
As per the Greek police, the syndicate capitalized on the vulnerability of certain women, manipulating them into becoming egg donors and surrogate mothers. This is something we're going to be seeing throughout. It disproportionately falls on women who have slipped through the cracks and are financially quite desperate or have come from broken homes, and so it's compounding the trauma of plenty of vulnerable people. Meanwhile, the apprehended individuals engaged in a web of deceit by orchestrating fabricated embryo transfers and facilitating unlawful adoptions. The criminal group typically reaped substantial gains from each surrogacy program, with earnings varying from between 70,000 and 100,000 euros. In certain instances, the nefarious enterprise even managed to amass as much as 120,000 euros. So, mail order babies, surrogacy has become a very lucrative trade, predominantly for Western women, lots of whom celebrities have their bodies as a commodity that they'd rather not ruin. So Paris Hilton recently used a surrogate because she said she was afraid of pregnancy.
Well, I'm sorry, if you want to be a mother, the prerequisite is to go through a pregnancy, not just because of the fact that it's the biological function, but because as part of that biological function, there's a lot of emotional bonding that goes on. It's different if you have carried the child to term because all of a sudden it has been part of you for that entire time. And there's a lot of bonding that goes on the baby side as well, learning to recognize your voice, learning to be comfortable in you. There's so much that goes on that if you are not the one carrying the child to term, there is an argument to be made that you are not the mother and that you have stolen the child's mother from you. This is what's radicalized a lot of people about gay men getting surrogates recently, is the image of a weeping child immediately after the birth being ferried away from the mother that carried it to term and being handed to 2 men who are essentially strangers to it. One of them might have some kind of biological connection to that child for, providing some of the
Biological material
needed. But still, the mother is one of the obviously an incredibly vital part of any child. And so to take it away from that is cruel.
Yeah, so
on a very instinctual level.
The baby's DNA actually lingers within the mother's system as a form of stem cells that can help repair damaged organs and fight off infections. So it's almost like every child you have sustains your life for a woman. This is part of one interesting reason why women have longer life expectancies than men, not just the difficult jobs and the stress of listening to women, I suppose. Joke. Don't fight me in the comments.
And the digging deep holes and others, and like deciding, oh, I can jump off of this and survive.
Yeah, we do some stupid stuff, but it's fun. And so this is why, and this is something that Mary has said: pregnancy doesn't just make a baby; it also makes a mother. And severing that bond between the child and the mother, when the child is not capable of the rational consent presumed as part of justifying the surrogacy industry, is cruel and it's wrong. And
I mean, there are other vital components of motherhood that happen immediately after
Mm.
the baby as well. I mean, even just something as simple as breastfeeding,
yes,
which can be difficult for some people, but there's so many different functions that serves, not just the nourishment of the child, but the skin to skin contact that further increases that bond that you've got going on there. Not even just to mention the practical matter of the fact that breastfeeding helps to set the baby's jawline in place properly and to position the chin and tongue properly.
and it increases IQ points as
Yep.
been borne out. And so you're setting your child at developmental disadvantages, which are deliberately engineered by having a surrogate. It's very different to adoption, where that's actually a noble thing of where you're rescuing a child from a disadvantageous situation. You're engineering the situation to make the babies fall at the first hurdle when the life starts, and it engenders, as I've been through in a podcast with Josh on early infant childcare, it engenders high cortisol levels from the beginning of their life. It screws with their ability to form long-lasting relationships. It can cause to drug dependencies and promiscuity and things like that, like other childhood traumas can. It's just utterly cruel. And the kinds of women that go into the surrogacy industry, as we've seen with this criminal gang, are particularly vulnerable themselves. And so this is something else that's happening in another country that we seemed so obsessed about as a bastion of democracy recently, which is Ukraine. Ukraine is the epicenter of the global surrogacy industry. And in this Guardian headline, in this exclusive interview, they literally say the bombs won't stop us. Business remains brisk at Ukraine surrogacy clinics. In March last year, just weeks after the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Remo and Amalia received an unexpected phone call from Kyiv. One of the largest surrogacy clinics in Europe was responding to the Italian couple by inviting them to the country for medical checks to begin the procedure to have a baby. So this was an Italian couple using a Ukrainian surrogate. They say, "We've been trying to make the dream of having our own child come true for 10 years, said Remo, 55. So well beyond her own fertility years.
And they started at 45, which I'm sorry, if you've started that late, then you've got to accept the difficulties that come with it. Perhaps at that age, if you're past your biological clock running out, past the point of, where it's either going to be really difficult, it's going to be massively risky for the child because it can cause Down syndrome, all sorts of physical problems. Perhaps at that point, maybe consider adoption.
Yeah,
If you're desperate to become a mother, if you realize that you made a mistake in not having children younger, do something kind for a child that doesn't have a family.
exactly. Rather than ripping one away from their own biological mother and commodifying the body of a poor woman in a literal war zone, but all right. Remo 55, for whom the surrogacy process is still continuing, it won't be bombs or the war that will stop us. Surrogacy clinics, which have thrived in Ukraine thanks to a liberal legal framework, we'll get back to that later, are still doing brisk business with hundreds of foreigners coming to Kyiv despite the war, mostly from Italy.
It's
Georgia,
Kiev.
same thing. Georgia Maloney's trying to put a stop to that. She's outlawed that, I think, for same-sex couples at least. Romania, Germany, and Britain. So there's a massive UK trade doing that at the moment, so we need to stop that. According to data from surrogacy clinics in Ukraine, more than 1,000 children have been born in Ukraine to surrogate mothers since the beginning of the Russian invasion. 600 of them were born at the Biotexcom clinic in Kiev, whatever, one of Europe's largest surrogacy clinics. Even in the first months of the war, foreign couples would still come here from all over the world to pick up their children. Ihor Pekonia, who is the medical director at Biotex.com, told The Guardian. We'll come back to that fella in a
This
moment.
just seems beyond anything else irresponsible. If
Yes.
you're talking, if it's Kiev, if that's one of the places where they have been bombed,
Yep.
and is one of the epicenters of the Russian offensive that they're trying to focus on, because obviously it's where the leadership is and all sorts of other resources are held, well, then I don't care. You should shut it down just for the safety of the people involved in it.
The other less well-funded firms that operate in this liberal framework have been found to have just orphaned the children because they haven't been able to get them out of the country because of the war. So they're generating orphans for profit. Yeah, it's genuinely quite horrible, but okay. He said the number of requests today are at pre-war level and we receive more requests than we can take. So genuine war profiteering, great. Last year, Biotexcom had 50 pregnant women in Ukrainian territories occupied by Russian forces, so more across the country, I would assume. Obtaining a child through Biotexcom clinic costs about €40,000. Pecchiona says more than half of that sum goes to the surrogate mothers. So at least they're moderately compensated for destroying the life of a child. Obtaining a child through, Dana's partner is also fighting on the front line. So this is a woman they interview in here. And in the south of Ukraine, she has 4 children of her own and is undertaking her first surrogacy for an Italian couple. Quote, this is from her, "The only reason why I agreed to do this is just for financial benefits. Plus, since my husband left for the front line, I need a way to support my 4 other children." So, taking vulnerable women in a war zone who would otherwise need community help and commodifying their bodies for the benefits of rich Western white women who have left it far beyond their prime. This isn't a very, very good thing. Why Ukraine specifically, though? So it's not just the fact that they can export a war zone. It's because the government there seems to be pretty hands-off over the kind of people they're conscripting into this and some of the ethical complications. In Pecona's own words, "We're looking for women in the former Soviet republics because logically the women have to be from poorer places than our clients." That's just the admission.
Because otherwise, women wouldn't choose to do something like this if they had other financial options to go fall back on.
Yeah, they're not desperate enough in other countries for us to use them as the raw materials for the ambition of gay couples or women that just left.
And I think raw materials is right because you are, as you say, just outright commodifying these women's bodies and a process that is, in a sense, magical and should be something that is sacred in a
Yes.
way that shouldn't just be sold off.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this isn't just a feminist talking point. Like, no, this is an actual example of the commodification of women's bodies at the expense of childhood well-being, which is something we should all care about.
It doesn't have to be a feminist talking point if you're talking about the well-being of the children
Exactly.
as well.
Yes. So Ukraine's commercial surrogacy industry contributes over 1.5 billion to the country's economy in 2018. That's the reason they don't want to crack down on it. Yep, money. The industry was valued at over 14 billion in 2022 and is projected to grow by around 25% annually in the coming years. The Biotech's Center for Reproduction is by far the biggest player in the international surrogacy market. The owner of reproductive technology services provider claimed that in 2018, the company controlled a mammoth 70% of the national surrogacy market and 25% of the global market. A quarter of the entire global market is currently from this war zone, from this company that decides to say, yeah, we know that women in other countries aren't poor enough to exploit. Right, major problems here. According to The Atlantic, the company even secured a bomb shelter to ensure that newborn production can continue unimpeded in the event of an attack.
Newborn production.
Yeah.
Such a horribly, horribly inhuman way of saying it.
Yep. A video published by Biotech's in early 2022 showed a typical shelter equipped with not only beds and sleeping bags, but cribs and gas masks as well. A primetime promotional ABC news package on the company celebrated its Russian bomb-proof baby factories, declaring Ukrainian surrogacy agency does whatever it takes to keep patients safe. Mothers who are having their children stolen from them. This is obviously the kind of logical excess of autonomy maximizing liberalism, which says, well, just because this woman consented, never mind the conditions of duress under which she consented, she can become the raw materials for someone else's personal ambition. Even though the baby itself also cannot consent because a baby doesn't choose who it's born to, and a child is not capable of consent, no matter how much the UN tries to tell me so. In case this wasn't dystopian enough, quote, "In 50 years, the population of most countries of the world will be reduced by half." So Tolofsky, the German owner of Biotech's has argued that as long as his company remains at the forefront of wider biotechnical industries, it promises to deliver a future in reproductive biotechnology where babies are generated in artificial wombs and genes are edited with computers. Do you remember ExoLife? That big baby factory thing, the proof of concept that was put out that looked a lot like the Matrix, where you can have your own personal gestation pod in the comfort of your own home?
I don't.
No? I haven't horrified you with that yet? Oh, okay. Well, we'll go and Google that, ladies and gentlemen, because that's becoming a reality.
I think I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
So in an interview with the Ukrainian newspaper Daylo, Tucholsky discussed the digital economy in the context of the reproductive technology industry, referencing climbing infertility rates and theories of population collapse presented by the tech billionaire Elon Musk and Chinese businessman Jack Ma. Tucholsky said that biotechnology will save the human race. Reproductive medicine is the future of humanity. The most important thing is ectogenesis, the ability to raise a child outside the human body, an artificial uterus, something like factories we all saw in the movie The Matrix.
Why do people see the future dystopian fictions and think, wow, great idea?
That's an instruction manual.
Also, climbing infertility rates.
Yes.
What is the evidence for such thing? Because there's
The WHO said 1 in 6.
1 in 6 being infertile. Yeah.
Experiencing fertility problems or being infertile.
Experiencing fertility problems. I think we've covered this before, but it slipped my mind exactly what the problems causing those infertility issues were. Do you remember it all?
So there is some speculation about something that cannot be discussed on YouTube, but we don't have any evidence in for that. There is also, and as I've spoken to Stephen Shaw about this, the fact that education and economic circumstances and cultural attitudes are elongating the date at which people try and conceive their first child. And
Yeah,
if
because
you
I was
reach,
thinking that would have something to do with it.
so it's personal choice. Also, economic circumstances caused by the government. That's beyond our scale.
For people who are of the proper age, who should be at the peak of their fertility, who are experiencing fertility problems, would it be something that I would say, like maybe a proper diet, exercise, and maybe drinking um, bottled or distilled water might be able to help with?
Yeah, also not taking the birth control pill because it just so happens that sperm rates globally have declined 62% in the last 50 years since the introduction of the birth control pill, probably due to water runoff. And also, the pill itself can cause long term fertility complications for women because if you set your biological function to off for so long, your body can start getting used to it.
And messes with all your hormones as well. That's literally why, some people can't take it because if you've got certain problems with your own hormones already, or if it can cause or if you've got a family history of blood clots, for instance, you're not allowed to take it because it can cause even more problems.
Yes. So, ladies, just don't take the pill. Listen to the advice of the other feminists that tell you to get rid of it as well. He says, I think within 5 to 7 years, we'll get ectogenesis, so gestating babies outside the womb. And he says that his company, so the one that lots of wealthy women are buying from, that controls 25% of the surrogacy trade around the world, is actively working in this direction. When asked how they plan to resolve the multitude of legal and ethical issues surrounding his futuristic baby factories, the CEO said, the most important thing is to prohibit law enforcement agencies from interfering in the work. So you should not be looking into the exploitative practices that we do because it will get in our way of making baby factories, just like the Matrix. Right.
I'm always recently I've found my mind drifting over to the old TED talk that Sam Hyde gave, in particular the bit where
He gave a TED talk.
have you not seen it? I'll
No.
have to show it to you. It's fantastic. It's Sam Hyde's, what is it, 2070 paradigm shift. That's what it was called. And there's a particular clip from it. I'm just thinking, what happens if the federal agents come in and start trying to shut us down? There's a clip of him just going, "We're just gonna kill him. We're just gonna kill him." I'm just imagining that being the primary thought of anybody who thinks about this, where they're like, "Oh well, what if somebody tries to stop us? Well, we'll just kill them."
Yeah, kind of Bond villain strategy, pretty much. So, just in case you weren't perturbed enough, well, when the babies actually come over here, or when the babies are being gestated in America, where commercial surrogacy is legal, there are some problems. So, Louise Perry's documented this in the Spectator piece. So, last July, this is July 2022, Albert and Anthony Sanninger filed a lawsuit against a high-end California fertility clinic because they tried to have a second boy. Their surrogate gave birth to a baby daughter. Already choosing male names and Gmail accounts for their future son, the couple had explicitly made clear that no female embryos were to be transferred into the body of their surrogate when they had 2 failed cycles of IVF after a successful pregnancy in 2020. Now, to add to the trauma of being forced to live with a healthy baby girl instead of a male, the Sanningers were forced to spend staggering amounts of money raising the 2 boys they wanted and a girl, all bought via fertility clinic services. They sued the clinic for reckless and/or intentional implantation of a female baby. After all, they'd already spent more money for the creation of their babies than most middle-class people spend on their children over the course of a decade.
You people sicken me.
Yeah, genuinely.
Jesus Christ, you've got a baby daughter who's not even really your daughter. You've taken away from her own mother, and then what? You're going to sue the clinic for doing it in the first place. You've created a life off of your own back using your own money, and you're what? Sickened at the idea that it's
Yeah. So they're creating legal precedent historically over the fact that their daughter is now unwanted.
we've gone too far.
Yep. Even more, just to really annoy you, a gay couple. So they wanted their surrogate mother because she got a breast cancer diagnosis to then abort their baby, and then demanded they get a death certificate to prove it because they said they didn't want their DNA out there. So, a disturbing report.
Every single one of these people should. I'll stop myself
Yep.
before I say go too far.
So this is the Center for Bioethics. This is a Californian gay couple, always California. They wanted the surrogate mother carrying their child to have an abortion after she was given a cancer diagnosis. So this is according to the CBC president and founder, Jennifer Lal. The woman, whose remains nameless, was carrying the child for a gay couple. The woman is married, mother of four, who had already volunteered to be a surrogate mother before she had a good experience, so she wanted to try again and try and help someone else. Again, noble intentions, but the entire industry is morally bankrupt. This time, the experience was horrible because when she was about 24 weeks along, she had a very, very bad breast cancer diagnosis. And so she had been advised that the treatment would lead her to possibly threaten the life of the unborn child. So the woman refused an abortion and she sought a hospital that would allow her to deliver the baby early so she could begin treatment for the cancer. So the baby would be delivered prematurely. It would run the risk of some health complications, but it could
It
still
would still be
survive.
born because at
Yes,
24 weeks, then the baby, if given the proper medical attention, can still survive.
exactly. And so she would be able to save her own life and the child's. But California law, and this refuses to refer to mothers who are surrogates as mothers. They call them gestational carriers. So birthing vessels, that sort of gender neutral language again. They consider the intended parents the child's parents. So you have ownership rights over the body of the woman that is carrying your child, in air quotes. And unequivocally, it states the surrogate and the surrogate spouse or partner is not a parent of and has no parental rights or duties with respect to the child or children. So the gay intended parents in the case wanted the surrogate to abort the baby. They didn't want the baby to be born early because the baby would have
Wow, I
medical
guess they
care involved.
really care about that child then.
Yeah, it brings into question how they would have treated it had the child survived. They may have continued severe medical needs throughout the child's life, and they said they didn't want anyone else adopting the child, even the surrogate herself who offered, because, quote, they didn't want their DNA out there being raised by someone else. The baby is not a product, you gross people. The surrogate ultimately found a hospital willing to induce labor and to deliver the baby. The woman underwent birth, but the baby sadly died during the process. So it's just a tragedy all round, genuinely.
That's
Yeah,
that's
it's awful.
that's really horrible. There's not much else I can say about it.
No, and so the message of just the midpoint, babies aren't to be bought and sold, nor should women's bodies be. This article points it out. Currently, India and Thailand, they've banned this commercial surrogacy practice because they know that overseas rich people will go into villages and try and commercialize women
Yeah.
who are desperate enough to try and engage in the practice.
And then you'll end up with these situations which are just harrowing all round.
Exactly. And so to quote from Louisa Perry's earlier article, purchasing children is not a human right and women are not vending machines. Surrogacy does not occur out of any true regard for the physical or emotional needs of the babies being bought. Ban it. And I agree. However, most legislation runs into a tech problem. And the tech problem we're facing, as has happened last week, is that for the first time in the UK, we now have womb transplants. Now, this might sound like a positive innovation because, as involved here, this is a 34-year-old woman. She was born with a rare condition, so her womb never properly developed. And her sister, who is 40, who has already had 2 children, said, I don't want any more. Here you go. So you can have your own children. And that's the first time this has happened in the UK.
I saw people celebrating this without the context that it was a woman, because clearly they were probably trying to sell it as a man finally gets womb implanted successfully. Now he's a real woman. But no, it was
Yes.
a woman that it happened to.
We'll get onto that. So the second woman is due to have this happen later in the autumn. Surgeons have already approved 10 prospective operations eligible for this to happen with. But something buried in this article is that they're using brain dead donors for the wombs. So do you remember a little while ago when there was that weird proposal that comatose and brain dead women would have their wombs harvested? Or when they're in a coma, they could just be used to gestate the baby if they signed over license to do so. We've genuinely got there of where we're harvesting the organs of brain dead women for this. Yeah, so this has already happened in America. This is a wholesome story, actually. This is Peyton Maeve. She's 29. She's had one daughter with her transplanted womb and also adopted another daughter because wanted to have children, seemed like a very wholesome and happy family. And she said, I'd love for more women to be able to have this option as another avenue outside surrogacy and adoption. And she's right. This would be a great way to replace the surrogacy industry and help women through no fault of their own who face fertility problems. There's 1 in 6 that haven't just left it too long, but have rare genetic conditions. That would be great. But of course, what's probably going to happen is that trans women, who are obviously women, are going to start giving birth through their neo-vaginas through implanted wombs, like the Danish girl wanted to do all those years ago. And there are also just some unreported side effects that I want to finish on just from a healthy transplant, even if you're not brain dead and it's not going to a trans woman. This is something that's been reported by Sonia Soda, who's been quite hot on this issue actually for The Observer. So turns out The Guardian, broken clocks and all that, I suppose. Read the medical papers and the list of risks for living womb donors, and it's dizzying. Urinary tract infections, fecal impaction, wound infection, bladder hypertonia, leg and buttock pain, anemia, respiratory failure during anesthesia, depression, early menopause. 1 in 10 of the donors in 45 analysed cases required further surgery. The medical team that carried out the UK transplant have developed techniques that reduce that, but certainly not eliminated. Scroll up, please.
Sorry.
It's all right, I was reading that. Certainly not eliminated the risks. How did none of this make it into the news reports? And so what I think is you're probably going to get a black market, or even worse, a de facto legal market of organ harvesting of vulnerable and comatose and possibly dead women to transplant into women who have had fertility problems for no fault of their own, or women that have left it too long, or trans women. And so that could eliminate the surrogacy trade. But even until then, the surrogacy trade is still going on in impoverished countries and literal war zones that are orphaning and or selling children that have been separated from their mothers. And so how this hasn't been declared a human trafficking trade is beyond me. And so I think we just need legislative action here. It just should be illegal to traffic a child overseas from a poor country that you've purchased. Surrogacy is horrible. And as you said, there should be certain things so sacred that they're beyond commodification. A civilized society would stop this. So we should.
Thanks for watching that segment from the podcast Lotus Eaters. If you enjoyed it and fancy supporting us, then you can go to our merch store and buy a mug, a hoodie, or anything else that we've got on there at the merch.lotuseaters.com. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do on a day-to-day basis, you can follow us on social media on Twitter at lotuseaters_com and also on Getter at lotuseaters_com. Thank you very much and goodbye.